And so now we will go ahead and invite our guests to open up their cameras, and everybody else too, because it's always more fun to see people if you feel to. Hriman and Padma, are you there? There they are. Okay, they're coming on. Oh, where'd they go?
Okay. Can you hear?
You're off.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you. Yes. We're just.
Okay, that's cool.
There you
Hello,
go.
hello, everyone. Oh my goodness, yeah. That's Sam. Okay, and Linda.
What?
Yeah. Hi. Oh my goodness.
We have
And
folks from
there's
all
Mike.
over.
Yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone.
So they're
Hi.
joining us here from Ananda in Washington. Are you out at Camino Island, or are you in town today, or where are you?
We are sitting in the living room at the Ananda community. We didn't want to impact the bandwidth at the temple where we live stream, so we decided we'd meet with all of you from our home here in Linwood.
Wonderful. Well, we're very happy to have you, and we'll go ahead and just hand it over to you to spend the next while to share with us in whatever fashion you feel to, and then around noon we'll do questions and answers, if that's okay with you.
Yes, of course. Yeah. You know, Padma and I are so used to, for 30 years, taking the inspiration from the Sunday readings that we couldn't help but take a look at today's reading and how devotees rise, and maybe share some thoughts on that. One thought that is pretty obvious, I think, to all of us is our path is so life affirming and affirming of our being children of God, that how devotees rise is basically the spiritual path of meditation and Kriya Yoga and positive living that we've been given by our lineage of gurus and by Swami Kriyananda. So it's a perfect and a very broad topic. I've been doing research, and Padma and I have been broadcasting Monday through Friday at noon on the original teachings of Master that are somewhat unpublished. That is to say, you can find some of them on Amazon and whatever, but not all of them. So we've been sharing snippets, 10 to 15 minutes every day, weekday, on different of his original lessons, which are quite charming and very powerful. And one of those lessons had to do with how devotees fall, which is how did we get in this mess to begin with? And of course, in our Western Christian tradition, that begins with our friends Adam and Eve. And Master, you know, he didn't really question in a scholarly way the Christian Bible. He just took it as it was and ran with it. And basically, you know, the lesson there that comes from India too is that we are children of God. We are born in the paradise of spirit because we are spirit, Tattvamasi, as it often said in Sanskrit. And so we made a choice. And I think we make choices every day to turn our backs on that connection with who we truly are, with God. And so we have a choice and we can turn back. So devotees rise by turning back, by going within. This is our basic teaching. You know, it's a strange reading today too. I sort of always chuckle about it. There is Jesus being quoted, "The poor ye shall have always with you." And I'm thinking, gosh, there could be somebody who was, let's just say, on the right side of the political ledger who's saying, oh yeah, we don't need to worry about the poor people. We can just get rich and be the 1% or something. And of course, that's not what's going on. You know, Jesus was responding, perhaps somewhat reactively, at least in an emotion, in a human sense, to Judas, who was being dishonest, right? And saying that the money for the ointment should have been, you know, sold and given to the poor. But Jesus could have just have easily said, we have our anxieties. We have all of our reasons not to meditate. We have our ill health. We have all the problems of the world. We have all these reasons not to think of God, not to meditate, not to serve wholeheartedly, not to contribute generously. But me ye shall not have always. And that me is the call for our only real purpose for being here together right now, our only real purpose for having been created, which is, I like to quote my Baltimore Catechism. I know there's no Catholics in Texas anymore, but my Baltimore Catechism said, we were born to know, love, and serve God. I can't think of a better definition. And so how devotees rise is basically a reminder to us. I mean, it's an affirmation of why we are gathered in the name of Spirit right here, right now, every Sunday, every day when we go into that meditation space and close our eyes and go within to make that divine contact. That's how devotees rise. And all these other problems that we have will always be there. It doesn't mean we don't try to be healthy. It doesn't mean we don't try to make the world a better place. But if we don't also do that from a transcendent space such as exists in the Father, if you will, and in the Christ within ourselves, and in the Spirit in all creation, then it's just more up and down. It's just more restlessness. It's just more activity. With good karma, bad karma, doesn't really matter. So today's topic is really goes to the heart of why we're together and why we were created. And last week, when devotees fell, it was a reminder of all the things that pull us down, that are, and basically a lot of them are good things. They're necessary. We have to support our family, perhaps, and fulfill our job and do a good job, etc. But they're not the reason we were here. And when we connect with that reason, then all these things are added unto us. You know, it's really not that complicated. And so, have you ever heard the epitaph that nobody will ever put on their tombstone, which is, I wish I spent more time at the office? Well, let's remember that. Let's not leave this world having people say, boy, that guy spent a lot of time at the office, or whatever it was. Let's go as devotees. Let's live as devotees. So, Padma, you want to share with us?
Well, I have the great blessing of getting to talk about the Bhagavad Gita portion of this. And I'm going to just refresh our memories what the Gita said about devotees rising. It says, say not ye, whoops, I'm on the wrong one. It says the state of freedom from action, that is, of eternal rest in the spirit, cannot be achieved without action. No one by mere renunciation and outward non-involvement can attain perfection. And picking up the thread where Hriman left off, it's not enough to only withdraw from the world, but if we're withdrawing from the world in meditation specifically, and in practicing Kriya, if we have it, the highest technique that Yogananda gave, Kriya itself means action. And so that form of meditation is designed to help free us. And even that is not of itself alone, not in the world that we live today, the world that is built on sound bites, the world that is extremely rajasic and active. Most of us are born and conditioned into behavior that we need to act. If we were able to sit and meditate and do our Kriya for 18 hours a day, wonderful, that would be it to do. But in most cases of people I know, myself included, I am compelled into some action outside of my meditation as well. And then, as the Gita is talking about, there is action that can help us rise. And that action is that action which is done with God, not only for God, but with God, in the remembrance of God. True karma yoga, action without desire, attachment to the fruits of our actions. And so those are the kinds of actions that we're looking for. There's really three aspects I want to just touch on very, very briefly because there's not much time. But one, the first and foremost is meditation. I like to remind people that all of Yogananda's techniques, Hong Sa, Om, Kriya, all of them, and even sitting in the silence, especially sitting in the silence, we're taught to gaze at the point between the eyebrows. Whatever else is going on in the practice, whether it's Hong Sa, Om, or Kriya, we gaze at the point between the eyebrows. And that is very, very conscious on Yogananda's part, because in doing so, we're magnetizing and lifting through that magnetism. We're not pushing up from below, we're magnetizing from above all that we are in an act of self-offering, as it were, and we're rising. And so we can do that also while we're in activity. We can keep our consciousness there as much as we can and keep it magnetized there. Try to relate to others from that point and be in that kind of action. The other aspect to that is satsang, or spending time, fellowship with truth, ultimately, and fellowship also with truth seekers, others of like mind, trying to do the same thing as we're doing right here, right now. And what does that mean? How does it translate? I remember Yogananda saying, that is to say, Swami Kriyananda tells us in his autobiography, The New Path, Yogananda saying at one point to the other monks, spend more time with Walter, that meaning Swami Kriyananda, who he had put in charge of the monks and who was much younger than any of them. But he said, spend time with him because he would help to magnetize them in their own self to rise, because his consciousness was uplifted a lot of the time. He was meditating a lot, he was serving, and he was his guru's true disciple. And so we had the blessing, some of us here, to spend time with Swami Kriyananda and to be in that presence and be uplifted. But it doesn't end there, because he's not here any longer physically. But we can listen to his talks from on YouTube or swamikriyananda.org. We can read the books 150 of them. Trust me, it will take you years to read all of those writings, all of those books. You can listen to Yogananda's talks. You can read Yogananda's books. If we do all of those things, we're spending time in uplifting our consciousness. And then if we seek out others who are uplifted, more uplifted than we are perhaps in that moment, meaning if we're being negative or critical, we don't try to seek out those who are going to agree with us. We try to seek out those who aren't in that state and who will have solutions to whatever our concerns are. Yogananda said, if I wanted to list the problems of this organization, I could go on for days. And so don't concentrate there, he said. Concentrate on solutions and positive thinking. So hang out with those who will support positive thinking. And I don't mean that we, suppress concerns that we might have, but if we state them in a positive way, we will naturally be drawn to people who can help us find solutions rather than dwell on the problems or gossip or do any of those things which it's impossible to stay in God remembrance when we're in a negative state of consciousness. So those thoughts and people who can help us stay in a positive state, even if they're not spiritually oriented at all, but they are just that kind of naturally happy person, because if they are, they're being spiritual, whether they know it or not. And then finally, I just wanted to say the third leg of the stool is non-attachment in our actions. I like to think of a friend of ours used to fly those balloons, and I like to think of all the ropes that are holding those balloons down and cutting them one by one, non-attachment, so that the balloon of our consciousness can rise. And that's sort of all we can say on the topic this morning. I'm just about out of time here. So, Maitri, what's next?
Well, what's next is we get the blessing of just sharing with you with question and answers about what you just shared with us and anything else that comes up. We ask people, they can either, unmute themselves or put it in the chat box. We will be going off of Facebook, right, for this part. Yeah, I guess we'll come off Facebook for this so that people can feel more free. I was just going to start off, if I may, because it brought up some thoughts for me. I was listening briefly to one of the chats of Asha this week, and she was talking about Satsang, and she was saying how oftentimes when we get into sort of a lower state of consciousness and whatnot, our tendency is to really withdraw and to run the opposite direction for whatever reason. It could be that we're just feeling like we don't want to put our burden on anybody and all that kind of thing. And she was saying, well, actually it's the exact opposite. If you want to get your consciousness uplifted, you need to seek out the company of others that are in a more uplifted state, your spiritual friends or those that are feeling that aren't on that same wavelength. And I can think of so many times when I have been exactly in that situation, and it doesn't mean that you go and you have to be talking with people. You go and you meditate with them, and you find that their energy helps you uplift you. We don't have to just all do it by ourselves and master working through all of us in different ways to keep us strong in that light. And the last thing I'll say is, you talked about Swami and being in the presence of Swami. How many times have we had that situation where we were feeling we had all these questions and everything, and then you go in his presence and you just get so uplifted, it all just sort of, just all you do is feel the joy. So that strength of satsang and being in the company of folks that together we can be stronger and feel that upliftment.
I see a question that's come up on the chat. Our weekday broadcasts, which begin at noon and then are recorded and they're always available, are best found on YouTube, the Ananda Washington YouTube channel. I think that's the question, isn't it, Padma?
I couldn't read it. It was too fast. Yes.
Yeah.
And you're on. So those are, I see them on Facebook, but you're also recording them and putting them on your YouTube channel.
Yes, I find that not everyone is on Facebook, so I generally recommend YouTube because it doesn't require the commitment that Facebook does.
But we're on both.
I wanted to also chime in on the beautiful words this morning, and thank you for being here, for taking the time and sharing with us in satsang and giving it more depth as to what it really means for us this morning. I just wanted to share that when I do the yoga postures at the beginning, you're supposed to do a little breathing. And at the end of my little breathing, I sing out Om. And then I do my yoga postures, and at the end I sit down again and I sing out Om. So I was thinking that all of yoga is between the Oms, the time. But what happens then if the yoga is on a frequent basis, then the other way of thinking about that I was thinking about is that all of yoga, meaning after the postures, is the time between the Oms, that all of our time away from yoga, even whether meditation, satsang, even going to the office, anything that we are doing, any way we are serving, that's our union with God also. And if we can always be there for someone, if they're not doing so well, it's a good idea also. So thank you very much for that. But it's just sort of poetic to me that all of yoga is between the Oms, whether it's the time on the mat or the time off of the mat.
Yeah. If you think about it, our different activities, we go out, it can be emotionally, it can be in terms of the body and the things we do, but we always come back. And you can describe that as coming back into the sleep state if you like, and most people do. But we always come back, and that's what, in effect, what you're saying. Om is our home. So, and speaking of our home, wasn't Richardson once a long time ago where we had a center?
Actually, our center was in what was called Addison, but it's right next door to Richardson. I mean, Maitri and Mark live in Richardson, and it was 25 minutes. So it's all North Dallas. Yeah.
But it started in Richardson. You're right. It started with Benton Parvati in Richardson. The original Sherman Center was in Richardson.
For those 2 years. That's true.
Because I remember writing envelopes and sending mail and stuff to Richardson.
Well, and it went from Richardson for 2 years to Farmers Branch for under 2 years, and then to Addison for, oh my gosh, 18, 20 years.
Right. Yes. Oh, okay. Well, we certainly wish all of you the best in your search, and it'll come. It'll come. The next step is there. So,
this is Shiva. Can you see me or can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So good to see you, Hriman. Hope you remember me. So, And I have a question. The Karma Yoga, or the topic that Padma explained, how do we do when we do our mental, our work in mental area, like most of us, like the software oriented activities, they require full attention of our mind. And how do we kind of like, if I keep this meditation, this centered on my eyes, the spiritual eyes, it's not paying full attention to the work that I am supposed to do. If I put full effort, because my mind, I mean, mind you cannot divide to do a good job, right? So when you pay attention to what you're supposed to do, and if you end up doing it, obviously it has its attaching power, and so you lose the meditative state what you need to have. So any tips or any techniques that you would think of for the mind workers?
Well, at Ananda, Swami Kriyananda taught us in our work to not only do we meditate morning and evening, but when we start our work, so when you sit down at your software engineering desk, you start it inwardly with a prayer. You don't have to fold your hands. Nobody has to know you're praying, but you start it inwardly with a prayer. And essentially, in order to spiritualize our activity, we need to raise our energy basically above the energy of that activity. And so the way we do that is by opening the heart, especially if you're doing a lot of mental work. You start the day at your desk by asking God inwardly to bless your activity, to bless your service, to see it as service. And then I understand completely when you have mental work to do, you know, you have to concentrate and you have to do it, and it's difficult to do the other at the same time. But with practice and with opening the heart at the beginning and offering that service to God, you'll find more and more that remembrance will come. It'll be right behind your mental activity. And it's sort of a both and. It's as if you're driving a car with a clutch and you have to remember to shift gears and to push in the clutch. But then in time, you graduate to an automatic and it just starts to happen bit by bit more automatically. But the first thing is to do it consciously and to do it as an act of devotion, even if it's mental work.
Thank you. It's nice.
I want to chime in there because when I first came on this path, I was in corporate America, like most people are, or in some kind of business. They're not working daily in the Ananda Center like I've had the blessing to do for so many years. So what I did in corporate America, many people here probably know it. Supriya used to put Post-it notes on the phone, not my cell phone. We didn't have those, on the real phone, because I was in customer support. There was a Post-it note, and every time I had to push that button on that regular old-time phone, I saw my Post-it note, and it had a word written on it, or a graphic actually, that reminded me of the divine. Nobody else knew what it meant. Nobody ever asked me what it meant, my other colleagues, but I saw it. So that's how I started to try to get everything I did. This customer is of the divine source. You know, it's anyway. And my colleagues would come in, and I had another thing they couldn't see on my cubicle wall because I would turn to see them at the cubicle opening, and there was a reminder. This colleague is divine, no matter what they were saying or doing. It wasn't easy, but I needed reminders.
Very good. Yes. Yes, indeed. You know, a master always lives. His consciousness is always here at the spiritual eye. Master would cook food. And in the Indian tradition, you don't taste it, I'm told. In any case, he could taste it here. And I have found that there's nothing that we don't otherwise do with the conscious mind, speaking on the phone, typing, etc., that some part of our awareness can't be. It's not that you're looking there, but you're feeling that center. You're acting as if through that center. And when you're speaking to other people, you're speaking at them through their spiritual eye. And bit by bit, as Padma was saying, your consciousness lifts. And what's amazing about that is added unto us is you get all sorts of information intuitively about the person you're speaking with, about the job you need to do. You live more and more from a higher plane of awareness, which is very practical. So it's a wonderful thing to do.
Box.
Thank you.
I'll let you do
There are some things in the chat box. David Cotton said, I like your comment of magnetizing the third eye, but what happens when you start becoming tense during meditations?
You know, Swami Kriyananda once went through a period where he was warned not to focus too deeply there, otherwise he could become ruthless. So yes, as Padma said earlier, we always start your meditation and your prayers from the heart, and then move the energy from the heart up. And if in fact, and people do, who try to meditate or focus here during the day, creates tension, then stop that and go into the heart. It's a question of relaxation. And so many of us are very good at tensing and not very good at relaxing and feeling. And so if you develop, and I used to get headaches when I first learned to meditate because I was barreling into heaven with all the willpower I had. But so go back to the heart if that happens. And then as you relax more, then you can lift that up.
And Linda says, another way to spiritualize work is to pause briefly once you accomplish or complete a step and thank God. So, all right. So anybody else have a question they would love to come on and share or comment?
Okay. Well, thank you for inviting us, and we'll keep y'all in our prayers for your next step. And maybe someday in the not distant future, we can come and visit you all there. It's so much more satisfying to be there in person.